Hi there, this is the even Steven trap in the Bishop's Gambit variation of the King's Gambit, and as its name suggests, the end position is more or less equal. After e4, e5, f4 is the King's Gambit, and e takes f4, King's Gambit accepted. If white were to try an immediate d4, we know that Queen h4 is fantastic for black, so usually white will play knight f3 first, but white has another move, bishop c4, which allows the queen to jump into h4, and this is called the Bishop's Gambit, and it's been played by Boris Spassky, former world champion, and it was in the immortal game in 1851 in London between Adolf Anderssen and Lionel Kizaretsky. So if black does play queen h4, the king now moves aside to f1. Black here can try various moves. In the immortal game, and also tried by Garry Kasparov, has been the move b5, which is known as the Brian counter gambit. However, black can also try g5, as well as d6 was also a good alternative for black. And after this move g5, white will invariably continue with the obvious knight f3, hitting the queen, and the queen backs off now to h5. White here can try moves like d4, knight c3, or the move we see very often in the King's Gambit in different forms, in different variations, is the move h4. And after this move h4, black should not be tempted to continue with g4, because that will allow knight to g5, which is hitting the pawn on g7. And if black was to defend then with knight h6, white can develop the other knight to c3, and if f6 hitting the knight, then knight d5 is fantastic for white, not only hitting the pawn on c7, check rook, but more importantly hitting the pawn now on f6, which is going to be forking the king and the queen. So after h4, the move g4 is not really advised. Better would be a move like bishop g7 or knight f6, or the move played in this trap, h6. And after this move h6, or I should say as well, also interesting here is perhaps the move b5 now, because if b5 would be played now, we'll have a look at that. If the bishop were to accept that gambited pawn on b5, then black's doing very well after g4 now, because then we've got the knight and the bishop being hit at the same time. That would force knight to g5, with a better game here for black. So after the move h6, white can try now the sacrifice. Bishop takes on f7, because if king takes on f7, then white is winning after knight e5, and that's going to pick up the queen on h5. So after bishop takes f7, queen takes f7, and now knight e5 hitting the queen. The queen's going to move over to g7, but now this diagonal has been vacated, the h5 e8 diagonal, so queen h5, and wherever the king moves to, either to e7 or to d8, there's going to be a fork. If the king moves to e7, then knight g6 is going to fork the king and the rook. And if the king were to move to d8, then knight f7 is forking the king and the rook. After knight f7, king moves back to e7, and now knight takes on h8, queen takes on h8. White will probably play h takes on g5. And this position is actually more or less equal, and so it's called the even Steven trap in the Bishop's Gambit of the King's Gambit. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Bye-bye.